Millennials are dominating insolvencies as credit card debts, student loans, CERB debts are adding up. That's our topic today on the Debt Matters podcast, where we help Canadians find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. I'm Wayne Kay, and we're going to talk about insolvencies and millennials and why they're being hit so hard. We're going to talk about their student loans. We're going to dive into why CERB debts have been affecting them more than some other groups. Also, credit card debts and what can be done to help. My guest today, Daniel Maximchuk with LC Taylor, licensed insolvency trustee from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Welcome back to the show, Daniel.
Hi, Wayne. Thanks for having me back on.
Oh, I'm looking forward to our topic today because, we hear a lot about the different age groups, and we're looking at one group in particular that is having a tough time with debts, and you're saying it's millennials. Tell me why.
Yeah. So, in the news, you're seeing articles, a stream of them basically, as the economy seems to be hitting a bit of a downturn here and interest rates have risen and the cost of living is up and rent and house prices. It seems like there's a recurring theme that this has been hitting millennials the hardest. And, that's not really a surprise to me necessarily, given that millennials are one of the younger generations who are in adulthood and facing everyday living costs and those factors that I mentioned earlier. But without the benefit of, having the added runway of older generations to have saved up money, built up assets, built up job security that, provides a bit of a buffer for them from these, turbulent factors, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. We should mention millennials are what age group?
So that's a good question, Wayne. There's some various definitions out there. I believe the standard accepted range for millennials are people born between 1981 and 1996. So these are people who, aren't young anymore per se. They're entering middle age at the top half of that, right?
Really?
And but still they've had a rough go the last number of years, and it's impacting their ability to have the same quality of life on average, of course, to some of the generations that were before, by all accounts.
And they're in the middle of that expensive part of life as well for a lot of them. They got the maybe teenage kids or kids, and they're in sports, and there a lot of the rep sports is super expensive. And then you got school, you're planning for this and that, and you're still trying to live life, and you got to buy a vehicle, and you got a cell phone, and you got. It's stressful just talking about all of the debts that can just pile on in, not a long amount of time.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly right? So when someone graduates these days, typically they have a negative net worth, right? They have student loans, they have no assets to their name really at that point, and they're trying to build from there. And, when the cost of everyday living is so expensive, it's hard to put additional funds away to pay off student loans or pay, mortgages or acquire assets or investments or, think about retirement, RRSPs, that kind of stuff, because you're just focused on the day to day with the cost of living being so high and factors in their life coming up, as you said, kids, the expenses of having kids, trying to get ahead in their careers and that kind of thing. It all adds up, and it seems to be, according to the statistics, really weighing heavily on millennials.
So let's talk about this. Credit card debts, student loans, CERB, tax debts, these things are coming up. So let's break them down. Student loans, is this very high in that group?
It is. And to my knowledge, it's only getting higher, right? So
Really?
These people have been out of school for some years, but with the costs of living so high, it's been tough to make a dent in these student loans for a lot of people. Because at the same time, the average student loan balance would be increasing, right? Tuitions are rising. And not only that, the cost of being a student is rising. The cost of rent, the cost of food, the cost of transportation to get to class, all those kind of things are higher than ever. And as a result, people are dipping further into their student loans to fund their education. And as a result, graduating from school with more student debt.
Right, and you come out of there, even if you don't have any debt, rent is crazy high these days. Everything is so expensive. You don't have any extra money to make those payments. So that is makes perfect sense. It's funny. There was a news story just a couple of weeks ago where a guy was actually living in Calgary, flying to Vancouver to do his classes, and then flying back. And I think he was flying every few days or something. But it was cheaper for him to do that than pay rent in Vancouver.
Yeah, I saw something about that too. I'm not sure about the math on that, but if you were to run the numbers on that, I'm sure this individual did, and they must have come to that conclusion. And that's crazy that you could pay that much in airfare and still come out ahead versus the cost of living in the city where you're going to school.
I know, that was wild. What about CERB tax debts? Can you explain why you're seeing that in millennials?
Yeah, so CERB, you'll recall, was the program during the pandemic that the government put into place to cover wages that were lost due to the pandemic, due to restrictions or various shutdowns that prevented people from being able to go to work, or their employer wasn't able to open. And that seems to have hit millennials at a particularly sensitive time when they were trying to, build their careers. They were in more entry-level, starting out type positions during the pandemic than older generations would have been. And as a result, when the door shut on businesses due to the pandemic shutdowns, the younger staff were often the first to be let go. So when they were let go, they had to turn to CERB to fund those things. And the way the programs were implemented, they were kind of rushed out. There were some parts of the legislation that was unclear whether people qualified or not. So of course, the cohorts that applied for CERB more are also the cohorts who are going to be owing some of the repayments that the government's asking back from people who may not have qualified without knowing, right? So, it's not really surprising to me that millennials would be higher up in this type of debts owing, because they were most impacted by the pandemic, affected their careers and where they were at that point of their life back in, those days.
Right. Okay, so that's made a big dent into them as well. So, I mean, it's a lot of stuff. And I actually know, quite a few in the millennial group, and the keeping up with the Joneses is very high in that group right now.
Yeah, and that adds to cost, right? So you see people about your age, they've been, out of school the same length of time as you have been, but they may have had totally different circumstances. They may have a different field of employment. They may have more family money, right? But you see them and they're the same age at the same, point in their life, at least age-wise, and they may have more things or be having, more experiences that they're flaunting, and to try to keep up with that costs money, of course. And if you don't have the money, that leads you to borrow the money, and that leads to debt that you're repaying with interest, right? That's one of the factors of social media too, which compared to generations prior to them, millennials are probably more involved in. People only post the positive aspects of their life and all the exciting, cool things they're doing, right? So you may see someone on your social media doing something extravagant and exciting and thinking that they're paying for it no sweat. But of course, they're not posting about, the 2 jobs they're working or all the shifts they have to drive Uber for to pay for that. And you think, well, I want to have that lifestyle too. And you borrow the money, and that kind of leads to a downward spiral when you're trying to repay it with interest later on.
Yeah, but it's quite a few people who actually do this, and you're right, it is social media, but I'm seeing that here in our area. I was talking with a parent actually, and she was saying that her daughter just feels the pressure to get a trailer and get a boat and get an ATV and get this and get that, and they're like, we just can't afford it. We look at it and there's no way we can do it, and we don't know how their friends are doing it, so they're kind of holding back. But once again, it's just one of those things. I've also heard, and this is quite surprising, I was talking with another friend, and he had somebody come in, a young worker who was buying up all kinds of different things. He got a great job, and he was like, well, you got to save money. He was giving him some financial advice, and he's like, nah, that's future Tom's problem. That's not mine. Right now, I'm just going to live my best life.
Yeah, and that's expensive, right? And I mean, you may be, if you make the comparison between the person who's buying the boat and the trailer and all of that, they might be enjoying the time in the moment, but later on they might be working an extra 5 or 10 years because they can't retire as early because they haven't saved anything for the future, right? Or it may delay other aspects of their life, but it's all a matter of priorities, right? And you can't tell other people how to live their lives, but you just got to look out, for what you want to get out of life and do the numbers for your own situation and think of what the best route is for you. And, for most people, carrying a significant amount of debt and paying interest every month is an expense that can take away from your future pleasure and benefits later on.
We did a show on credit card debts. Let's put this into the millennial world. What are you seeing with credit card debts for millennials?
Yeah, so it's high as well, right? And for many of the reasons that we've covered already, because the cost of living is higher, so people are having to supplement their income with debt, and credit cards are the most accessible form of debt, right? The easiest to obtain. Yep. So when they need to cover the gap between their expenses and what they have to and or want to spend compared to their income, credit cards are a relatively accessible way to do that. And that's kind of the issue now, as well as keeping up with the Joneses, as you mentioned, right? Again, credit cards are the easiest way to obtain the money so that you can, go on that trip and post it on your social media, or, cover your lifestyle where you're making the boat or trailer payments. And that leads to significant debt at significant interest rates and can really put a damper on your financial future later on.
So Daniel, you've done nothing but stress us out. We've got.
You're right. This has kind of been a downer episode, Wayne. I don't know what happened.
Well, I'm just looking at it now. We got student loans. Those are very tough to pay back. CERB tax debts. You got credit card debts. Give us some positive here. How do we get out of this? What do we do to help?
Yeah. So, I mean, as you mentioned, we talked about this credit card debt episode, and there were some things we discussed there too. Potentially consolidate your debt, maybe approach your credit card companies for products with lower interest rates, those kind of things. Failing that, I mean, it's a good idea to reach out to a licensed insolvency trustee. There is some flexibility to deal with CERB debts, credit card debts, when you're dealing with a professional under, the federal legislation that's there to help out debtors who have debts that they might not be able to recover from. And depending on your circumstances, student loans might be able to be included in that as well. Really? So there's no cost. LITs don't charge typically for the initial consultation and potentially further advice as well. So why not reach out, find out what your options are, and we can go from there. Because I mean, it's an expensive time to be a millennial, to be anyone really. Yeah. Millennials having had less time to build up, to accumulate assets, to insulate themselves from that, seem to be the hardest hit at the moment. We're seeing in our practice, I know, more and more millennials having to come in for consultations because they have debt that they've realized that they need help with. And that's great that they're reaching out and seeking that advice. So, if you're a millennial listening to this and you think you might be in that boat, you can know that there's, hundreds, thousands of your peers across Canada reaching out to LITs and getting solutions. And, there's no reason why you couldn't do the same.
So before they come see you, if they're good, because they're already stressed and they know, okay, oh, look at this. Daniel's giving us some hope. We got some options here. What do they need to do before they come see you? What should they track?
Well, for the first consultation, there's not too much that they need to do or prepare. It's more a conversation to discuss their situation and, what they might have for income at that point in time, what they have for debts, what their assets are, what their assets might be worth. But it's very, at least with us, pretty informal in that first conversation, just to get a sense of what people are facing and what we might be able to do to help. And then if they decide that it's something that they want to pursue further, then that might be where we dig deeper into the numbers and, talk about, okay, well, if you want to offer your creditors a settlement, this might be what the creditors are looking for, or, based on this, what can you afford on these numbers? Now that you have it all laid out in front of it, you tell me what you think you can afford to offer your creditors. Oh. And, but for that first meeting, don't be put off or hesitant because you think there's a lot of prep work. Just make the call, start the conversation, and go from there is usually the most straightforward way to do it. And it's usually without much stress.
I love that. But at least it takes the stress off, because if I was to say, oh my gosh, I've had this credit card debt or this student loan debt for all this time, and you go, oh yeah, that's okay. We can work with that. It's like, oh really? You can? Okay, that's good to know. So you know the law and how it's all going to work and how it's all going to work out. And I do appreciate your time on the show. Anything else we need to cover?
No, I think that's been a good conversation, Wayne. Next time, let's try and keep it a bit more upbeat. But at least at the end, we concluded with some, solutions that people might have to get them out of whatever situation they're in and have a brighter financial future.
Hey, bad finances suck. There's no way putting it. That's the way it is, and we're happy to give everybody just a little bit of help to get out of it. We sure appreciate your time on this show, Daniel. Have yourself a great one.
You as well. Thanks, Wayne. Take care.
You can learn more about that free consultation with LC Taylor Licensed Insolvency Trustee through the website lctaylor.com. And that's it for today's Debt Matters podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. And of course, for more information, you can always check out debtmatters.ca. Thanks for listening.